Samantha, and we're here at the Stitchin Post today, and I am going to show you how to make this puffy quilt. So this is what we're talking about today. So you can see my version, and this one is made with some hand-dyed fabrics and a whole collection of them. So you can't make this exact one, but you can make your own version of this. It's kind of a fun technique. And I'm going to show you how to make the little pockets that the stuffing goes into, okay? So my quilt, each of these squares is put together with 2 pieces of fabric, and I call them pockets. This one is, the top piece is 4.5 inches and the bottom piece is 4 inches. We're going to do them with 5-inch big piece, top piece, so this is going to be the fabric that you see. This bottom piece of fabric, nobody's ever going to see, right? It's inside, it's on the bottom, and then there's a layer of batting, and then there's the backing fabric. Okay, so this fabric, like, I've got white here today, but if you were able to see the back of this one, there's some ancient Batman fabric from when my college-age son was a kid, and some, there's a whole mix of just scrap fabric that I didn't like anymore, wasn't going to use, and so I just cut them up and did them on the back, because like I said, you're not going to see it, so it's a great chance to use that up. And then, if you want to make it easy, you can just go for a 5-inch charm pack. And this quilt, I think, is 260 of these top pieces, but they're smaller, so you wouldn't need quite as many, but you're probably going to need about 3, maybe 4 charm packs if you want to get a decent sized quilt. Okay, so let's make one of the pockets. Okay, so you're going to take your smaller inside fabric, and like I said, this is sized 4.5 inches square, and your larger fabric that's going to be the top of your quilt, and it is 5 inches, okay? And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to put them together, line them up, and notice that my right side is facing up. Don't put your right sides together here, okay? And I find that this particular foot is really helpful. It's a very skinny, small foot, because what I want to do is I want to basically get as close to this edge as I can. You need to try and get outside of your 1/4 inch seam, because if you are more than a 1/4 inch, you're going to see this thread on the top of your quilt when you're done, okay? So I'm just gonna start it out here, and I've got my nice little bunny tail here, my extra piece of fabric to help me get started without having a bunch of thread. So I'm gonna start a little bit, I'm gonna back tack, and once I get just maybe an inch or so in, you're gonna pick up that top piece of fabric, line it up with the bottom, okay? And somewhere about the middle, you're just gonna fold it over and line it up. So, and it's not like, if you're a perfectionist, this may not be the quilt for you, unless you wanna measure every one of these to get them exactly in the middle. I don't, so I estimate, and it doesn't really matter. All right, I'm gonna back tack again, and then what I would do, and we're not obviously making something this big right now, but I chain sew them by row, right? So you're gonna wanna do by row. And so I'm just gonna show you here with a couple pieces what I would do. So I would do this next side like this, and so one more side. All right, and now again, all I'm doing is picking it up, matching it right to that bottom piece, and then I'm just gonna fold it over, okay? So it's all lined up, and I'm gonna sew down to the end. And I don't know if Trish can get this, but you can see this outside edge is my 1/4 inch, and you can see I've got it so I can just barely barely see the fabric in there. So I'm making a very small seam here. Okay, so we're gonna pretend that I have just done the whole row, and then the chain piecing, especially if you are wanting to do something like this, like I did on my quilt with the ombre, is it really helps you keep all of your pieces in order, right? So they stay that way. So I would normally, like I said, do the whole row, and then I'm gonna go back, start at the beginning, and do the next side, okay? So I'm gonna do the exact same thing on side number 2. And fold. So it's the same process, just on another side. Okay. Okay. So I'm on the 3rd side here. And I'm gonna do, again, the exact same thing. Fold it back. Okay, so this is what you're gonna end up with. You've basically made a pocket with pleats in it, right? And so one side is open and the other 3 sides are sewn, so you can kind of see from the back that it's all even with that smaller piece of fabric. So this is what you would really kind of end up with, is this big long chain of all your pieces that you were gonna put in order, all right? So then what we're gonna do is take these apart, okay? And just like you were piecing a regular quilt, I'm gonna piece these together, okay? And you wanna make sure that your pockets are all facing the same direction, right? So that they're all gonna be open on the same side. So I'm gonna just sew these together. I don't like pins, but if you wanna use pins, go ahead, okay? And now I'm gonna do a 1/4 inch seam, right? And I'm hopefully gonna be over that other seam that I sewed to make the pocket, so that you don't see it. Okay, and now, since this is gonna be a pillow, not a quilt, I'm making it just 3 by 3, okay? So I'm gonna sew this onto here. So, and in theory, and I'm sure somebody has done it, where you could do this all in one. You could put the pleats in and just sew one seam. I think that would take me more time than sewing them ahead of time. You can also, if you want, you can increase your stitch length and base when you make the pockets. I don't, because it, then I just have to mess around with the stitch. But if you want to try to save a little thread and maybe go a little bit faster, you could do that. All right, so now we have our first row. This is where it gets a little bit interesting. So now you're gonna stuff it, okay? And this is like, if you ignore everything else I've said, this is the most important thing. Do not overstuff. Like, really, really don't overstuff, because you're never gonna get it sewn closed. And the stuffing goes a lot further than you think it's going to. This is, I can scrunch it down into a little tiny ball, but it's more than enough stuffing for one block, okay? And when you stuff it, you wanna push it all the way back. That could use just a tiny bit more. I stuff it so they're about half full. There. So you want to get it, you know, as far back from where you're going to be sewing as possible. All right, so you're going to stuff all of these. Just like that. So now you've completed your first row and they're stuffed and you've got the open side on your pockets. So what we're gonna do to make it a little bit easier to sew on the next row is we're just gonna baste these shut to get our pleat in, okay? So again, I've got my stuffing pushed as far back as I can get it. And I'm using my nice tiny little foot so I can have the least amount of interference from my stuffing. I've cranked up the stitch on my machine to baste, and I'm gonna do pretty much exactly what I did before. We're just all in a row now. I'm gonna start, and then I'm gonna line this up and make my little pleat or fold as close to the middle as I can. And then I'm just gonna baste that shut. Okay, I'm gonna start the second one. And here's my fold. And we'll just baste that shut. So you could try to do this and sew your row on at the same time. I did that the first time, and I ended up having to rip it out because it didn't catch all the layers, and my fold came out, and apparently I'm just not that talented. So maybe you are, and can do it that way. This is easier for me. There we go. We're going to take our next row that's ready to go and sew it on. Now, notice that this is not stuffed. This row isn't, this row is. And we want to make sure that our opening for stuffing is still open when we're done. Okay, so that is not gonna be the seam that I sew, all right? So I'm just gonna line up my seams here, and I'm gonna just pin it right there. Now the good thing, at least I think it's a good thing about this quilt, is if your corners don't match up exactly, it doesn't matter because nobody's ever gonna see them because all of the puffy comes up around it and you can't tell. So a good portion of my corners in there are not perfectly lined up, and I'm totally okay with that, doesn't matter. All right, so now we're just gonna sew this row on. And I'm making the regular 1/4 inch seam at this point, trying to hide those previous seams from making the pocket. All right, and I do not wish to sew over my pin. So now we've finished and we've sewn our second row to the first row. And you can see this row is stuffed and sewn in, and this row is not stuffed, and the pockets are facing the same side. So if you were, making a quilt or gonna finish this as a pillow, right, you would continue doing the exact same thing. Stuff them, baste it, sew on your next row, right? And then when you're done, you add batting and backing just like you would for any other quilt. The only thing I would suggest is, because these are stuffed and right up to the edge, getting a traditional binding on can be a little bit difficult. So I suggest making sure that your backing fabric is extra big and that you trim it down and fold it to the front to be the binding. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.